Hello and welcome to the Indie Beginning Podcast. I am your host, Benjamin Frankie. It is our mission to bring readers and authors together through reviews, discussion, and unique topic episodes inspired by the author or their work. This week I narrate the beginning of Ravage, Apocalypse of Wolves by McGraw. A dark spirit has unleashed an unkillable army of werewolves on the world, reinforced by an eternal solar eclipse that will keep its army transformed. This week's episode is brought to you by Shirts by Sarah. Head over to shirtsbysarah.com to find the shirt that transforms your soul. Remember to subscribe to the podcast to keep up to date with the stories and the discussions. And now, get those headphones on tight, and don't worry about that presence you sense just over your shoulder as I introduce you to Ravage, Apocalypse of Wolves. The silence of Fort Ibarra was too much to bear. Whenever there was silence, something destructive was usually close behind, the calm before the storm. A lone Englishman named Kirkley was in a dilemma. He had to take his time searching through Fort Ibarra, but he couldn't make too much noise, lest he wanted to attract the dog soldiers. He had a powerful bullpup L-85 assault rifle, but the bullets weren't fatal to the wolfmen. They stunned them, true, but regular old bullets or buckshot pellets just made the stagger before they get back up, sprinting towards the shooter, claws stained with blood and teeth dripping with saliva. When the dog soldiers attacked, the soldiers across the United Kingdom held down the forts firmly, but as the attacks persisted, sometimes even hours apart from one another, the ammunition began to whittle down along with the soldiers. The few stragglers left decided to spend what could potentially be their last hours of existence moving south, instead of staying put waiting for imminent death. They loaded their last few vehicles with many troops, weapons, and supplies as they could, and set off for Italy, where it was rumored that there was a solution being developed, or at least a defense, against the Wolfmen. Still, nobody's heard of the remnants of the military of Scotland. Kirkley knew he had to be as quiet as possible, because if the dog soldiers found him, he wouldn't stand a chance. A pack of immortal wolfmen with monstrous teeth, razor claws, and supernatural strength would easily rip apart one lone human with an assault rifle that might as well have been a child's toy gun. His holdout group, consisting of 3 men, himself included, and 2 women, were counting on him to recover more supplies, ideally food. Their food stock was all but depleted. Still, if Kirkley found any full ammunition magazines for any of their group members' weapons, there wouldn't be an ounce of hesitation to snatch them into his carry-all backpack. Kirkley was the strongest member of his group, and the de facto leader, which is why he was always going out to get the group's supplies. Kirkley perused the old fort, and found what he very desperately needed to find, the barracks. Even though the layout of the group's previously looted military compound was different than Fort Ibarra's, the principle was essentially the same. The barracks always had weapons, ammunition, food, or all of the above. The problem was that the doors were locked. Judging by the sound made by the other side of the door, Kirkley deduced that somebody on the inside had placed a board or pipe between the door handles, rendering it unable to open from the outside or inside. What Kirkley quickly realized is that whoever locked them had to have done it from inside the building, and there was a possibility that the person might have come through a sunroof or window or something. Kirkley quietly crept around the perimeter of the building, searching for any sort of entrance. No such luck. There were windows, but they were boarded up from the inside. If the windows were boarded and the doors were locked, then somebody could potentially be in the building. Kirkley switched the safety off of his assault rifle and fired a short, controlled burst at the window and the boards. The bullets cut through the wood like scissors through paper, and Kirkley quickly dove through the window, into the small building. The rifle wasn't equipped with a sound suppressor, so somebody, or something, could have easily heard the gunshots. The dog soldiers had enhanced hearing and scent, so they could literally run a mile in a minute, tracing the origin of the sound that they had associated with prey. And much like sharks, they could detect the slightest drop of blood from far away. As soon as Kirkley was situated, he slung the L-85 and began to snuff around for worthwhile supplies. The barracks contained 5 rooms, excluding the showers, and, in ascending order from the door to the end of the corridor, the first room had 2 cans of unopened soda, a can of ravioli, a boot knife, a damaged 9mm pistol, and a bottle of water. Kirkley stashed the consumables and moved to the next room, which contained nothing. Kirkley opened the door to the third room, which had a few handgun magazines of varied caliber. The fourth room was overwhelmingly full of ammunition and weapons. 3 shotguns, 2 assault rifles, 2 submachine guns, 4 handguns, and a plethora of ammunition for said weapon types. Kirkley took every Stanag magazine he could find, as well as a few magazines for Samantha's MP5A2 and the PAX G3 battle rifle. Hell, if he led the group here, they could easily hold out for 2 weeks. The fifth and final room yielded a horrifying discovery, which was the corpse of a soldier who barricaded himself within the barracks. There was a hole in his head, blood everywhere, a gun that had slid out of his hand the moment he had pulled the trigger. In his lap was a note, which Kirkley read. Date unknown. Sergeant Bailey, part of 2nd Platoon, A Company, holding out in Barracks A2. My bastard mates left me to die in the jaws of those furry wolfmen. Fortunately for me, and unfortunately for those twats, I pilfered one of the supply crates, taking a bunch of their weapons and supplies. There is supposedly some hope in this dystopian world, however. It is rumored that down in Italy, military engineers are developing special bullets that will enable us to slay the dog soldiers. That's what the rumors claim. But with my broken arm, and the weather getting colder, I fear it is only a matter of time before I meet a foul end. I take my life, hoping that the spirits who curse mankind in this time of darkness will show me some mercy and sympathy. Kirkley silently nodded, placing the note in the dead soldier's pocket and shutting his eyes before sliding him under one of the bunk beds. It was far from a proper burial, but it would prevent those damned wolves from desecrating his body. Speak of the devil, Kirkley thought, hearing the long, drawn-out howl. Kirkley shut the door in a hurry, locked it, and hid under the other bed, leaving his carry-all next to where he hid the dead soldier. Before hiding, Kirkley took out 2 magazines for his assault rifle and prepared to open fire on the wolfman who would soon track him down. Kirkley waited, not even blinking. He kept his eyes down, his susat optic, preparing at any moment to open up on the 7-foot dog soldier. Through the door he heard a quiet grumbling snarl, and the remnants of the glass in the window shatter. The dog was now in the building, and it was prepared to systematically search the barracks. Every time the wolfman put a foot down on the linoleum floor, Kirkley could hear its overgrown claws click against the floor, and its deep, heavy breathing. The dog soldier finally reached the door to the room that Kirkley was hiding in, and began rattling the handle. It quickly realized that the door was locked, and if somebody had locked the door from the inside, there was food behind the door. Ferocious, determined clawing against the door sounded like painful screeching of nails on a chalkboard. It made Kirkley flinch in pain, his ears and skin tingling as the monster made its monstrosity of noise. When the door had been scratched thin, the beast began punching the door with unrelenting force, managing to burst through it. The moment Kirkley saw the whites of his teeth, he opened fire on the dog soldier, blasting it with an overwhelming volume of gunfire. As the automatic rifle buzzed and rang in the high-pitched tone as it fired, the dog soldier staggered backwards, before backing against the wall. Kirkley watched as his opponent's scarred and bruised skin regenerated as he reloaded his weapon as quickly as possible. Round 2. The wolfman lunged for Kirkley's neck, snarling ferociously. But Kirkley dove out of the way, causing the beast to hit the wall. Kirkley quickly slammed the door and tossed his final stun grenade into the room as the dog rose to its feet. The grenade went off, painfully stunning and disorienting the dog soldier. Kirkley took these precious seconds to grab a box-fed shotgun and 2 seemingly custom-built drum magazines for it from the 4th room before lunging out the window and sprinting back into the woods to his group's hideout. Completely exhausted, Kirkley stumbled his way back to camp, which was situated on a series of old bunkers on the cliffside overlooking the ocean. If he and his companions weren't being hunted by packs of wolfmen, then he might be able to enjoy the beauty of this world around him and the gorgeous view of the ocean from the mighty cliffs. Sitting up in a tall tree was Poet, the sniper. Poet never told anybody her name, nor did she have any intention to. She was a very quiet woman, a trait that definitely aided her sniping. Her skill was far beyond unmatched, for she could pin a dog soldier straight in the forehead on a windy night from a mile away. She rarely talked, but what she had to say was always worth listening to. "Any wolfmen in sight, Poet?" Kirkley called. Poet shook her head. Kirkley continued through his camp, heading over to the fire where the group chef Samantha was cooking dinner for the team. "Hey, Kirkle," Samantha said, nodding to him as she grilled a juicy-looking steak over the fire pit. "Did you find anything worthwhile at Fort Ibarra?" "Aside from a dog soldier and a dead man, I found some pretty good loot," said Kirkley. "Some canned food and drinks, more ammo for our 5.56s, more ammo for your MP5, and some ammo for Captain Pack's G3. I also got this shotgun and some drum magazines for it." "It could definitely come in handy," Samantha remarked. "For close encounters," said Kirkley. Kirkley dug into his backpack and handed Samantha the magazines for her weapon, as well as all of the food and water. "I'll make sure this gets distributed to the team," Samantha said. If Kirkley were to die in the battle against the dog soldiers, Samantha would be an excellent leader. The tall woman with short brown hair put everybody else over everything else, and would righteously give her own life for the others. She was an excellent cook and made delicious dishes, even with the scarce consumables available to them. "Hey, Kirkley," Terry said, waving to his friend and personal role model. "I heard some gunshots in the distance. Did you run into any trouble?" "I might have made a new friend or two," Kirkley remarked. If Kirkley was Batman, Terry was Robin. Terry looked up to Kirkley and did his best to imitate his behavior. Kirkley understood that, like Robin, Terry had lost his parents, and it was during the team's disastrous mission in a nearby village that they found Terry. They'd lost Ryan and McEvoy, so they were down on manpower and were eager to get some more help. One of Terry's strongest characteristics was his emotional imbalances. Terry could get very excited and energetic, but he was also quick to panic and get worked up. These two characteristics had an oil and water relationship with each other. Kirkley continued through camp, opening the trap door into the bunkers, built during the war, and heading to Captain Pack's room, which was positioned in an overlook of the ocean. Captain Pack, once a soldier fighting proudly for the British Armed Forces, deserted after his Special Forces unit was annihilated in a disastrous invasion in the Middle East. Pack was another potential leadership figure, but his strength was his knowledge of weaponry, and his proficiency with a plethora of firearms and calibers was invaluable. "Captain?" Kirkley asked. "Kirk, you're back," Pack said, calmly inhaling and exhaling as he listened to the sound of the ocean waves and seagulls squawking. "Yeah, I made a new friend. Everybody bites back, and he sort of had sharp set of teeth." Pack ferociously swung around as he whipped his sidearm out of his chest holster, pressing the barrel of his handgun into Kirkley's forehead. "Pack! Pack! Pack! I wasn't serious. Stand down!" Captain Pack slowly lowered his weapon before putting the gun back into his chest holster. "Sorry, Kirk," said Pack. "I thought you'd been bitten or clawed. False alarm. What all did you get from Fort Ibarra?" "I got a few cans of sustenance that I gave to Samantha, as well as some fully loaded magazines for her MP5, said Kirkley. "Plus, I got 2 magazines for your gun." Kirkley tossed the pack of 7.62 magazines, which Pack caught. Pack placed them in his satchel before resuming his conversation with Kirkley. "What do you got there?" he asked, pointing to Kirkley's shotgun. "Found this in a huge stockpile in the barracks in Ibarra. Picked up 2 drum magazines for it, not counting the one already loaded. Know what it is?" "Italian-designed Spaz 15. Can go pump or auto," Pack said. "Very versatile weapon, that is. Definitely hold on to it, because it might come in handy." "That's not the only thing that's going to come in handy," Kirkley commented. "I've got some—" "Wolfpack coming!" Samantha screamed. Gunshots soon followed. Kirkley dropped his Spaz 15 and readied his L85 as Captain Pack bolted out the door with his G3. A mixture of varied calibers of gunfire erupted as the howling monstrous men tore the silence apart. Aiming down the sussat scope of his 85, Kirkley trained the tip of his obelisk post onto the beastly head of one of the dog soldiers and fired. A large volley of 5.56 ammo sprayed over the wolfman's face, taking an eye out, and causing blood to rain down the creature's face. The wolf sprinted off in the dark, misty tree line, where it could regenerate safely before returning to attack the sitting ducks. "Reloading!" shouted Kirkley as the depleted magazines of his assault rifle hit the forest floor. Kirkley slammed a fresh new magazine in as the dog soldiers blindly charged the campsite. Poet fired a rifle shot into the heel of one of the wolfmen, which caused it to stumble forward and fall. The beast almost immediately got back up and began charging towards Poet, but Pack intercepted it, smashing it with the butt of its battle rifle and following it up with numerous single shots fired in rapid succession that almost sounded like lightning bolts. Terry's energy was unleashed after a long time of relative tranquility, and he immediately began fighting with the spirit of fire as the wolves rushed in. Terry held his pump-action shotgun at waist level and never stopped blasting the wolves. However, his fate was sealed when his weapon ran out of ammo. Since reloading was completely impossible with the dog soldiers swarming in, Terry was forced to use the shotgun as a blunt instrument, shouting and laughing as he smashed the wolves with the stock of the weapon. However, his momentum was quickly broken along with the shotgun when one of the two wolves attacking him threw a straight punch that snapped through the shotgun and slugged him in the chin. Terry was momentarily stunned. The wolf took advantage of this, grabbing the boy's neck with a muscular hand, squeezing Terry's neck with unrelenting force, barely keeping him breathing. The dog soldier threw Terry against a tree, breaking his spine with a painful crack. The wolfman grabbed Terry's ankles and hauled him off into the darkness. Samantha was the only one to witness the gruesome death, but she couldn't put too much focus on it, lest the same thing happen to her. Samantha was firing from a prone position with her submachine gun positioned on the top of a bunker. Despite firing the lowest caliber weapon, her bullets were stunning the wolfman with great effectiveness. In fact, she seemed rather excited, and laughed as she held down the trigger. She was so zoned out that she didn't notice the dog soldier slowly raising its claws behind her. Before the beast could butcher the unaware human, Kirkley leapt down from a tree, kicking the dog soldier in the jaw and knocking it backwards. When the wolf stumbled backwards, it sent Samantha tumbling as well. The beast and the beauty rolled backwards, towards the edge of the cliff. Samantha's weapon went hurtling over the cliff, falling to the crashing waves below, as Samantha herself clung on for dear life, with the wolfman holding on to her ankle. Kirkley furiously fired into the wolfman's face, causing it to release the girl and plummet to its presumed death. Kirkley grabbed Samantha's wrist just as she couldn't hold on much longer, and pulled her to safety. By the time Samantha and Kirkley had run back over to camp, Poet and Pack had finished driving off the wolves, which suddenly broke off their attack. "Did you get 'em all?" asked Kirkley. Poet nodded in affirmation. "Where's Terry?" Kirkley asked nervously, noticing that there was a head missing. "They took Terry," Samantha sighed. "He was covering Poet, and one of those things snatched him from behind and dragged him screaming off into the darkness." "Fuck!" Kirkley shouted, kicking the dirt in frustration. "We're one man down. We just got bushwhacked by the dog soldiers, and we're low on ammo. Just after I made a voyage to the fucking barracks and very nearly died doing so." "Kirkley, please," Samantha pleaded, gently pulling on his shoulder. "We've got to stay strong." "I know," Kirkley sighed, "but it's pretty tough when you lose somebody who has been at your side for 2 years in our last stand against the Wolfmen." "Speaking of which," said Pack, "what summoned them here?" Poet broke the silence without speaking a word. She immediately got up and grabbed the cooked steak that Samantha had been cooking, before wastefully pitching it over the side of the cliff. "It was the steak," Samantha deduced. "The scent of the grilled steak lured 'em in. Either way, they know where we live now, so we really should think about packing up and moving out." "Where?" said Pack, the crack of desperation in his voice. "This is the only safe place left in Scotland. The town we went to was completely full of dogs. Both McEvoy and Ryan died there. We were all lucky enough to get away, but they weren't. And now Terry's dead, and Samantha lost her weapon, and they know where we are. They all died, and I couldn't save them." "Captain," said Kirkley, "calm down. You can't focus on what was. Act on what is. We need you to stay strong, because if the dog soldiers divide our numbers up again, then we're done for. The 4 of us need to stick together. We honor the fallen by staying alive." "Okay," Pack said, taking deep breaths. "Okay. Kirk, you said you had some news before we were ambushed." "All right, mates, gather round," Kirkley said. "When I went to that fort, I found a dead guard who sealed himself into the barracks, and he had written a note before he committed suicide. In this note, he mentioned that there was something down in Italy that would be a remedy to the dog soldiers' attacks." "Italy?" Samantha scoffed. "Do you have midnight sun madness, Kirkman?" "Look, all I'm implying is that there's a remedy to this crisis, and it's down in Italy," Kirkley insisted. "Think about it. All of the soldiers flocked down there in trucks." "Still," said Samantha, We don't have any transportation, and Italy's extremely far away. Add to the fact that there are ferocious packs of furballs with teeth running all around this forest, and cities, and towns, and we probably won't make it 2 miles before we're all torn apart, piece by piece. Samantha, which sounds more appealing? Sitting ducks ripe for the slaughter, or moving towards the light at the end of the tunnel? Samantha raised her finger and opened her mouth to try to object, but she couldn't find it within her to do so. Fine. Looks like we've got no choice. The most important step for Kirkley and the others was to pack up and salvage whatever gear they could, and whatever they needed. Samantha discarded her MP5 magazines, knowing they would be entirely useless without a rifle to load them in. As Kirkley loaded his carry-all backpack with as many supplies as he could, Pack and Poet spent time going through the ammunition, checking the amount of bullets and the amount of magazines, and from there, trying to lighten their load. "All right, lads and ladies," Kirkley announced. "What's our stock?" "Your rifle has 6 good magazines stuffed with ammo," said Captain Pack. "My rifle has 3 magazines, Poet's has 3, and that Spaz 15 you got hasn't fired off a single round." "All right, we're good on ammunition then," said Kirkley. "Samantha, what do we have as far as consumables?" 6 cans of edible food, 2 full bottles of water, several cans of soft drinks. As far as medical supplies go, we've got some morphine injectors, an EpiPen, a couple of bandages. That's about it. "All right, we've scrounged everything useful. Get ready to move out in 10 minutes, Kirkley announced. "We've got to get some good ground covered as soon as possible, because the wolves know our position, and they're probably hungry for seconds. Samantha, grab the shotgun." 10 minutes had passed, and Kirkley, Poet, Samantha, and Pack were all geared up, their firearms as fully loaded as their backpacks. They were all ready to set off towards Italy, to set off towards salvation. But something kept them anchored to their improvised home. Not even bold, gun-ho Kirkley could find himself moving more than 15 yards from the team's bunker. It was a fear of setting foot in the dark forest, where the packs of wild wolfmen ran rampant. Kirkley and the group stood vigilant, just staring off into the mist that shrouded over the lower levels of the forest floor. Their legs were as solid and immobile as the tree trunks, and they wouldn't budge. Pack finally spoke out. "So, are we all going to move, or are we just going to stand here like shooting range targets?" "Pack," said Samantha, "we're all afraid because those things are prowling around, and they're probably—" A long drawn-out howl echoed through the darkness, and it sounded close. The team immediately readied their weapons and aimed down their sights, ready to pour a frenzy of bullets and pellets into the dog soldiers. Seconds later, a 7-foot wolf-like creature with a long snout, solid black eyes, gray fur, and teeth coated in a revolting mixture of blood and saliva came sprinting out of the mist, ferociously sprinting towards Kirkley. Kirkley aimed for the beast's head and squeezed the trigger, ferociously spitting bullets at the dog soldier. The wolfman reeled back in pain, scratching at its bloody and bruised face. As the survivors continued suppressing the wounded wolfman, a second howl was heard, and a third one quickly followed the second. "There's more of 'em," Kirkley shouted. "Move for the tree line." With the first dog soldier down on its knees, Kirkley firmly kicked it in the snout, leaving it to whimper and howl in agony before rejoining his comrades. More dogs came running into the open, and the squad had to turn around to open fire on them. The thundering, crackling noise of the G3 battle rifle wielded by Captain Pack was perhaps the most distinguishable sound amidst all of the gunfire, howling, shouting, and roaring. After several shots, Pack's rifle clicked, and he emptied the depleted magazine before quickly slamming a fresh new one in and cocking his weapon. As Pack engaged a wolf 10 yards away, Samantha went trigger-happy on her Spaz 15, firing a frenzied swarm of buckshot pellets, mixed with slug rounds. The combination of ammunition types were completely devastating to the dog soldier she fired upon, causing it to drop down to the ground, to the point where Samantha questioned whether or not it was dying from its injuries. As Pack and Samantha provided covering fire, Poet and Kirkley sprinted further into the forest, glancing back every so often to make sure their comrades hadn't fallen. After running a quarter of a mile from the bunkers, the team regrouped next to a cluster of pine trees and sat down on a collapsed log to regain their breath. "Are they still out there?" asked Kirkley. "Well, we drove 'em back," said Captain Pack. "They're still out there, but they're keeping their distance, staying within the tree line, probably waiting to launch an attack as soon as their wounds are healed." Good enough for me, Kirkley replied. So what now, Chief? Samantha questioned. Our plan hasn't deviated at all, said Kirkley. We need to keep heading south. We need to get an edge over those dog soldiers, and apparently there's salvation in Italy. For anyone who is a giant pussy carrying a rifle, I'm sorry to inform you we can't head back the way we just came, because the wolf pack's in our way. There's no turning back now. Ravage, Apocalypse of Wolves is available on Amazon. Remember to leave a review for this story and all of the stories you read when you finish. Any review left for this story on our ACM Books page will be featured on next week's episode. You can also help the Indie Beginning podcast by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your shows. Reviews are so important for any project. They promote the show and help us bring you the best content possible. Tune in next week when we talk to indie author McGraw about his story, Keeping Popular Themes Fresh, and more. Indie Beginning is an ACM Books production. All readings in this episode were performed by myself with permission from the author. Production and editing of this podcast was also done by myself. I am your host, Benjamin Frankie, asking everyone to read more books, be the best possible you, and to simply enjoy this wonderful life. Thanks for listening.